Okay, well, thanks everyone for attending today's webinar hosted by Brightpoint Infotech and Sylogist. We really appreciate your time. And what I'd like to do here is just kind of go through a couple of things here before we actually get into the demonstration of the software. Number one, just wanted to give you just a brief introduction on both these organizations that you see here on the screen. And then secondly, just give you kind of an overview of the software we plan to showcase today, and then just kind of walk down through the detailed agenda. Um, So as you can see here on the left-hand side of your screen, my name is Shannon Walsh, and I'm the sales manager here at Brightpoint Infotech. And I'm joined by R.K. Richards, who is a solution architect at Sylogist, and also Mark Sutton, who's the director of strategic partnerships. So the theme of today's presentation webinar is modernizing nonprofits with SylogistMission ERP, which will, by the end of this meeting here, you'll be really clear on who is Brightpoint, Sylogist, and the solution that we are presenting today. Okay, so just some housekeeping items here. We have roughly 60 minutes dedicated for this session. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so just kind of going through a couple of these slides. And then we've muted all mics just to obviously just to black out all the background noise. But at the end of the software demonstration, we should have about 15 minutes here for any questions. But if you wanted to ask any questions and put into the chat, then we can address them in real time, or we can follow up with you after this session. Okay, so as you can see here on the left-hand side here, Brightpoint Infotech, we are a very well-established Microsoft Dynamics partner. So we've been working with non-for-profits and other industries all around ERP consulting, specifically for Microsoft ERP systems. So our core competency is provide those consulting services, implementation services, and training. So that's effectively what we do. And then you see here on the right-hand side, Sylogist and SylogistMission ERP. It is a solution that is purpose-built on Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. So that is the core foundational ERP system for Sylogist. And effectively what it does, it helps non-for-profits, manage everything from complex financials to donor relationships and to stay in compliance. So that's what we do as two organizations, and we are an established Sylogist partner. So the agenda items here for today here just really get into more so around the demo side here. We're going to walk through the SylogistMission ERP, like I had mentioned. It's built on Microsoft Business Central. It is a full cloud-based solution. We will give you that kind of navigation overview to start. So what would be the experience before a user as they're navigating through the system? We can talk about some of the security and permissions, what a user can and cannot access, provided on what role you assign them, and then just give you a general navigation of the application. And then we can get into the second part, which is all around the dimensions, like how non-for-profits set up chart of accounts, how to use dimensions for financial reporting. Those are kind of key things that we'll focus on. And then just general journal imports, payroll, donations, those types of things. Moving on to recurring journals, revenue, expense, AP, talk about vendor and purchase invoices, get into the bank deposits, bank recs, and the system is just feature rich in reporting. So we can go into some of the visual applications such as Power BI, reports that are in the role center that users would have access to. And then we can leave you with what that experience would look like from a mobile application as well. So those are the key things that we want to demonstrate in the 30 to 35 minutes. Okay. So just to you know put out there some of the feedback that we've gotten from other non-for-profits when it comes to various different problems, when it comes to increasing financial pressures, resource constraints. Um, And then what we do is we help those nonprofits mainly do a couple things here: streamline financial and operational processes, improve the grant and donor management, in order for you guys to have that enhanced decision making with all the real time insights. So how do we address these challenges? Well, what you'll learn here today is that it's going to be an increase in productivity, reducing some of the administrative burdens, enabling the nonprofits to allocate more resources towards bigger priorities within the mission. And by leveraging the technology we're going to show you today, ultimately that's going to enhance efficiency and accountability. So there's a number of offerings. We're going to focus on Sylogist ERP, but again, we talked about the foundational application being Business Central. We'll show you some of the Power BI, which is data visualization. We also have a couple of other solutions that we can talk outside this webinar when it comes to automating document management with some of the AI solutions that we have. So those are areas that we see nonprofits focusing on as well lately. And again, this is a bit repetitive, but some of the services that we provide here are on the right hand side. Okay, so challenges for not-for-profits: complex financial management, multi-entity and fund accounting, donor and campaign tracking, compliance reporting requirements. And what Sylogist does to address that, you'll see today, simplifies multi-entity and fund accounting, streamline the donor and campaign management by leveraging Business Central and CRM as well for seamless integration. And last here's you'll see this in the live demonstration, but just at a very high level here are the kind of the core functional areas that we'll be focusing on: accounting for non-for-profits, grant and fund management, budget and expense tracking, multi-entity consolidation, so and so forth. So this just wanted to give you just a quick little overview here before we get into the demonstration. So is there any questions that anyone has at this point right now? So RK, I'll hand it over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Shannon. I am sharing my screen. Can you all see that? Thank you very much. Okay, so I am sharing with you SylogistMission ERP. Um, SylogistMission ERP is built on Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. So it's one of the most deployed ERPs in the world. It's used by all sorts of industries. And the beauty of Business Central is that it can be extended for many different types of industries. And that is what we have done at Sylogist. We have taken Microsoft Business Central, we're leveraging the power and the software development of Microsoft, and then we've extended it to make it fund accounting, to make it award and grant management. We've paired it with a CRM if any of you are receiving donations. So we've put it on the Microsoft platform and given it a nonprofit flavor. And what I'm sharing with you is the landing page. And this is just an example of a landing page. You can see that it's web-based. I could access this from any web-connected device. I can access it from a tablet, the cell phone, the mobile app. I'll share that with you. And I can configure this page to look however I would like it to. And then the user can also personalize it to look specific ways as well. So a group of users is probably going to have the same profile. And those are permissions. They can have a user profile or a role, and maybe you're the accountant, or maybe you're the CFO, or maybe you're the payroll administrator, or maybe you're the program manager or the grant manager. We could just configure a role to fill your particular business function, and that will have permissions embedded into it. If you're the controller, you're going to be able to see the bank accounts and the vendors and the customers. If you're the payroll administrator, maybe you can't see AP and you can't see the bank accounts. And if you're the executive director of the organization, maybe you just come in and you have read-only access to everything, and you're doing some approvals. So no matter where you're at in the user group, we can design an experience that fits you. And Microsoft has done a great job of making these pages personalizable to the user. The way that I have it structured here is we've got some menus up top, and I've got some finance menus for my journals and various things, and some cash management menus, and then sales and purchasing. And then I've bookmarked some things that I consistently access. So I'm constantly looking at financial reports or the chart of accounts or my journals or my vendors, or my bank account reconciliations. So those are just bookmarked pages. And then I have some actions, which is create a new invoice, create a new purchase invoice, a new sales invoice, but I could add other actions there if I needed to or wanted to. Down a little bit further, we have our insight section. In my insight section, in my demo environment, I'm showing you 3 reports here. I'm showing you an accounting and finance Power BI report. I could expand that report and I could, look at that in different ways. I've got a donations report. So maybe this is connected to the CRM. Maybe it's looking at my accounting data. And then I've got a volunteers report. Again, I could be looking at some sort of volunteers database. I could be looking at data that I've imported into the ERP. Over here to the right, those are all Power BI reports, and I'm going to talk about Power BI reporting towards the back end of this presentation. The other type of reports that we have are what I call in-solution reports, and they're called financial reports. And if you were to go look up in the Microsoft documentation, you would see them called financial reports as well. And I have some reports that are scheduled to be sent to me. They're sent to me, you can see, daily or weekly, whatever it is. I've got a statement of functional expenses, a balance sheet, and then I've got sort of a management analysis cost center report. So these are all sent to me. They can be sent to me in PDF. The ones that I'm showing you here, it just happened to be Excel. So the entire solution is heavily integrated with all of the Excel tools. And then scrolling down a little bit further, I'm showing some trial balance accounts here. I don't have to show this, but I'm just showing some accounts that I care about. And then I'm also showing some user tasks. I like to think of the user tasks as a month-end checklist. It could be any other sort of user task as well. Reconcile my accounts, post my accruals, deferrals, do my payroll, run my financial statements, make my closing entries, all the sorts of things that you would expect. I could assign those to a user, or I can assign them to a user group. And they don't have to be accounting in nature. They could be other sorts of tasks as well. I'm just showing you accounting type tasks. And so that's our landing page, and that's sort of the user experience. And I'd just like to outline that to begin. Are there any questions about that before I move on to the accounting and the general ledger and how that's structured? All right. And if you want to type something in the chat, I'll monitor that as well, and happy to respond in chat. The way that we are different from Business Central. So Sylogist has taken Business Central, and this is the product that I'm showing you, and we've extended it, and we've made it different. And the way that we've made it different is we've made it a fund accounting solution. So if you were just using base Business Central, which lots of people do, you would look and feel the same as ours does, but the general ledger would be different, and the way that stuff posts is different. And so you'll see that in our solution, there's this fund code, this fund dimension that's always required on every transaction. That doesn't exist in Business Central out of the box. And then the other way in which Sylogist has extended it is out of the box, Business Central gives you 2 dimensions. Sylogist gives you 8 what we call global dimensions. And we find these to be important for our nonprofit clients because you're tracking lots of activities. We work with lots of NGOs. We work with lots of schools. We work with lots of community program-oriented organizations, and they're doing lots of things. And so they need to be able to track a funding source across programs and across locations and across initiatives. And so that's what our 8 global dimensions provide, is the ability to do really detailed, deep financial reporting, nonprofit financial reporting, while also always including a fund code on every transaction. And so just to give you a little bit better sense of that, I want to drill into the dimensions a little bit further. So in many cases, we have people that come from GP, or they're coming from QuickBooks, or they're coming from Blackbaud's Financial Edge, or any other solution I'm not thinking of, and they're used to an account string. Business Central does not have account strings, it has dimensions. So now I'm looking at, the dimensions in my demo environment are called cost center and program and project and um, contract, but they could be called whatever you would like to call them. Whatever your organization needs is what we would call those dimensions. And we would work with your controller and your CFO and your program people, and we would design a chart of accounts that makes sense um, from a financial reporting perspective. And you can see that in my demo environment, I have lots of cost centers. So I have a dimension called cost center, and then underneath that dimension, I could have hundreds and hundreds and thousands of cost centers. I could keep going. There's no limit to the number of cost centers that I could have. Some of these cost centers I've just indicated with numbers, like my finance is 450 and HR is 460. Some of them I've indicated with text and numbers. So my annual appeal 2025, my administrative cost center, my finance cost center, in this case, is just text. So there's no right or wrong way to do it, but I can track lots of things in that way. If I wanted to track programs, some of my programs are tutoring and literacy and immunizations and the acting workshop and the art walk and the spring festival and everything that you can imagine. Any sort of activity that you think needs to be tracked from a revenue and expense standpoint, anything that you think the board wants to have tracked, anything that your CFO wants to have tracked, we create a dimension and then we can track it and we can provide very detailed financial reporting at that point. And that's the beauty of Business Central. And that's why people like me love Business Central, is because of that dimensional nature. And so I'm just going to drill into that a little bit further. I'm going to take you into what's called the chart of accounts page. And the chart of accounts page is an ad hoc, I refer to it as an ad hoc reporting page, but it's a live trial balance. So I can drill into every account. You can see my natural accounts here, my revenues, expenses, my assets and liabilities are up here towards the top. But as I scroll down, I'm getting into the income statement now. And you can see my contributions account. My contributions account has $370 million. This is unfiltered. It's unfiltered by a date range. It's unfiltered by cost center or fund or anything. It's just everything that has ever been entered in the history of that account. I could drill into that number. And now I'm looking at our ledger. Everything that's ever been recorded to our contributions account, I could send it to Teams. I could send it to Excel. I could analyze it there. If I wanted to filter this in some way, I could. I could filter it by date. I could filter it by cost center. I could filter it by program. So there's lots of ways that I could slice and dice this. I could also do what's called analysis mode. So, back to the Microsoft side of things, one of the things that Microsoft has done is they've brought pivot table functionality into the general ledger. What you just saw me do there is I clicked into my general ledger into this analysis mode functionality, and it turned my ledger into a pivot table. And I can now pivot account 4010 in a number of ways. I could pivot on fund. Maybe I want to see all the contributions in the history of Fund 100. And I could easily scroll over here and see what that number is and scroll into the bottom and get a total. I could pivot that on any of the funds or all of the funds, or I could pivot that on a cost center. Maybe I want to see all the contributions that have ever gone through cost center 300. Now I'm looking at that and I see, there's climate initiatives and various things. Maybe I want to look at all of the contributions in the history of program 7000. So now I'm looking at that. So program 7000 in our case is financial stability program, or the program 6000 is rental assistance. So you can see how I'm very easily slicing the data, and that's what Business Central is great at. You can also see that I've just gone back to my chart of accounts page. I can see the budget for any of these accounts. I can see what's been committed, what's been encumbered. So if you're using our solution for purchasing, if you have an approved requisition, it's committed. If you have an approved purchase order, it's been encumbered. So I can see those columns as well. I can see my actual expenses and I can see my available budget funds. But I can also filter this. Maybe I want to filter this on um, a grant, maybe grant 109. I can see everything. It's a federal award. It's gone. There's been $370,000 in revenues. We've spent $220,000 on salaries on that grant. There's been some sub awards on that grant. I can tell you everything that's ever happened. Uh, Maybe I want to look at an endowment. If you're a nonprofit that has invested funds, I can see that we've made or received $200,000 in contributions to this endowment. I can see the entire unrealized gain and loss on this endowment, and I can see the net asset balance of this endowment. So whether it's a program service oriented sort of operations where I actually have, restricted funds that are being spent on community services in the case of an award or a grant, or if it's an endowment and I simply have invested funds that are accumulating and being allocated across various things. Our solution does it because it's a fund accounting solution. And so just to take you into that fund accounting record and how we're different, we always have a balance in trial balance by fund. So we have lots of clients that use our solution, lots of different nonprofits. Some of them are heavily grant funded, and if I were to go to their funds, I would see hundreds and hundreds of funds. And then I could go to other nonprofit clients that we have, and they may have like 4 or 5 funds. And there's everywhere in between. So I just want to make that point that in this particular demo environment, there's lots and lots of funds, and we have clients like that. But we also have clients that are only, they've got 4 or 5 funds. So if I look at any of these particular funds, if I look at my grant, I can see immediately everything that's ever happened. I've got a trial balance. I can see it's a restricted fund. I can see that it's an award. So we're classifying it by restricted or unrestricted. We're classifying it, excuse me, by award type, and we have a trial balance. That's what our fund accounting solution does for us. Everything that's ever gone through this fund, I'm looking at it right here. Let me take you to another fund. If I go to Fund 100, the general fund, you can see that there's been $296 million in transactions that have gone through the general fund. If I go to the forest fund, there's been $579 in transactions. If I go through the oncology research, there's nothing. So you can see how no matter what it is, I can very easily look at it and tell you what's happened. My scholarship endowment has $1.1 million. There was a corpus invested back in 2022. There have been annual spends that have occurred, and then there have been some unrealized gains and losses that have occurred as well. So SylogistMission, built on Dynamics 365 Business Central, a Microsoft product, and we've extended it for fund accounting. And I've just taken you through sort of the nuts and bolts of how we've extended it and what we've done to make it a fund accounting solution. Any questions about that before I move on to some of the other functionalities? All right, I'm going to move on to our award management. This specific section that I'm about to show is unique to any organization that's grant funded. If you're grant funded and if you have enough grants, you understand the headache associated with managing all kinds of grants. And just looking at this page, you can see how this module would be helpful. I'm looking at a list of grants, and I can immediately tell you the net asset balance of any of these grants. Some of them are zero. This one's $21,000. This one's $2 million. I can tell you the start date and the end date of the grant, the type of the grant. I can see what's been obligated, what's been actually expended, and I can see the funder's reference number. If I click into the record a little bit further, when we received this award, we created an award. And you can see how we're tracking this award. There's lots of ways to track this award. We're tracking the funder's name. The sponsoring funder on this one is the ECHO organization. There was originating funder, maybe. Federal aid was the originating funder. There's a start date and end date associated with this award. We're classifying this as a grant. We could be classifying this as a contract or a cooperative agreement or a major gift. We're classifying this as a health grant. It could be a marine grant or a sustainability grant or a research grant. Anything that you can imagine is another way that we classify it there. Now I'm tracking the reference numbers for my funder. I'm tracking my funder's reference number. I'm tracking the CFDA number, the appropriation number, the things that I need to report back to them. And now I have some rules as well. I'm going to come back to these rules, but these rules are very important. There's revenue recognition rules, indirect cost recovery rules, and invoicing rules. So if you're an organization that is funded through grants, you understand that you could have multiple grant funding sources, all with different revenue recognition rules, all with different indirect cost recovery rules. In our solution, you can specifically apply rules to each grant to make the month-end accounting, the release from restriction, the recognition, to be a little bit more efficient than on the side of the desk. I'm going to come back to that. On our award record, we're also tracking the original estimate. So we originally estimated $1 million, or we submitted for $1 million. They awarded us $800,000. We've restricted this. So when we won this award, we restricted this in the ledger. And this is very important because it prevents us from making stupid little accounting mistakes that would cause our funding to come under scrutiny. So if I'm using the ECHO award or the ECHO fund, I must use programs 1300 through 1320. I can use a range of general ledger accounts. I can use general ledger accounts 4,000 to 5,000 and 7,000 to 8,000. So I can use income statement accounts, certain income statement accounts. And I can post from 1/5/21 to 1/5/22. If my general ledger entry meets all of this criteria right here, it will post. If it does not meet any of these criteria, it will not post, and it will give the user an error message saying that it did not meet the program, or it didn't meet the GL account, or it didn't meet the date. So it provides really strong financial controls to make sure that we're not entering expenses and allocating expenses where they shouldn't be allocated, or to the wrong program or to the wrong funding source. And you can get very granular with that in applying these restrictions. And if you have 50 grants or 100 grants or even a dozen grants, being able to apply this level of scrutiny and this level of detail is really important. What else? You can do subawards if you want to grant out. We can do that as well. You can see that I have terms and conditions on this grant. There's an audit required. There's personnel required. There are milestones on this one. Program milestones, financial reporting milestones, certification milestones. So we're tracking all of this information that we've brought it into the ERP, and we're using it to inform, our workflows and to interact with our budget and interact with our users. Okay, so that is the award card. We've created an award. We've created a fund. We now have our rules. So it's month end. I've entered some expenses. And I just want to show you how I could record things to that particular award and then show you how those rules would work. So if I was entering an invoice, I'll just go to a particular vendor. Maybe I'm using this vendor right here, Charleston Business Solutions, and I want to enter a new invoice. And maybe that invoice is applicable to my my Fund 109. You can see that I can enter it there. I can go to the appropriate program, and I can post it. Now, I need to enter the actual expense here, but I'm going to pull in what's called a recurring purchase line. So it'll just be a monthly services invoice, and I've got my invoice populated. I can post it. And if I needed to post it to a different program, I could. If I needed to post it to a different program, I could. Or if I needed to post it to a different fund, I could. Once I post it, at the end of the month, I can do what's called revenue recognition and indirect cost recovery. And I run through a process. So I've applied a rule to all of these awards. I've just entered a bunch of expenses. Some of these expenses hit that award. And now at the end of the month, I need to release those funds from restriction. And I do that through the rules. So on this particular award, award 117, award 118, you can see that I'm calculating an amount, I'm recognizing an amount, and I'm creating a journal entry. Ultimately, this is going to be a $259,000 journal entry that's going to release and recognize the restriction associated with each of these restricted funds. And so let me show you how that rule is set up. A revenue recognition rule is it's set up very similar to the way an indirect cost recovery rule is set up. And this is specific Sylogist functionality that we built for our nonprofit clients. So let's say that you have a grant that says you can recognize revenue per all of your incurred expenses. So every time that you you expense something, you can recognize revenue. In this case, we've defined that. What is the source of all these transactions? It's all of our expenses accounts and Fund 109. What are the rates that we want to apply to it? We're going to apply a rate of 15% to everything that we've captured up here. So if we've captured $100,000 in expenses that meet our criteria, we're going to recognize $15,000. Or if this amount says 50%, we're going to recognize $50,000. Is there a limit? Sometimes our grantors say that you can recognize salaries up to 50 grand, or you can recognize overhead up to 50 grand. We could apply a limit here. And then down here on this last line, we're basically telling it which accounts to debit and credit with the calculated amount. So if it calculated $15,000 or $50,000, it's going to debit and credit these accounts. And this could be a 2-line journal entry or a 4-line journal entry. And so that's a very basic example. It could be a very sophisticated example as well. But now just think about having all of these grants and all of this activity captured in the general ledger. And at the end of the month, rather than working on an Excel spreadsheet and exporting the activity and coming up with a journal entry, we're using the system to create this journal entry for us as part of our month-end process. And so that's what our award management module does. And we have lots of clients that use it, but not all of our clients use it. Some of our clients just use us for the fund accounting and for the workflows. So I would say, there's a decent chunk of our client base that cares heavily about fund accounting. There's another chunk of our client base that cares heavily about grants, and you could be either one of those organizations. Okay, so I'm just going to go for a couple of more minutes here because I wanted to touch on reporting, and then I'll pass it back over to Shannon. So I talk about reporting as a tool set, and there's a few different tools that I like to call out. One is our in-solution reports, and the other is Power BI. So you can see in my landing page, this is how we present the reporting experience. We're presenting some Power BI reports, and then we're presenting some in-solution reports as well. So if I was like the controller and I was in the weeds and looking at all the details, I would click into the financial reports and I would go look at my statement of activities or my statement of functional expenses even. Maybe let's just find one that I like. Let's go with this one. Okay. Let me do one other thing here. All right. So now we're looking at an income statement. And you can see that the thing that I like about the in-solution reports is exactly what I just did with it. I just filtered this report on the fly. So it's a report that's already built out. I could like hide all these filtering options and just look at the numbers, or I can expand it. And when I clicked into the report initially, the date range was very narrow and I wasn't seeing any numbers. So I just expanded the date range and then I made it a budget versus actual report as well. So you can see here that I'm looking at a nonprofit budget versus actual, and there's contributions and program costs, and you can get down in the expenses. And then across the top, we've got current year budget percentage, remaining, last fiscal year. I could create whatever you wanted. You could give me your audit, and I could come in here and I could create the same roll up, and it's very easy and user friendly. And if your first line is not contributions, maybe your first line is tuition if you're a education institution, or maybe it's grants, or maybe it's, we have organizations that collect taxes, so it could be anything. And then if you want 10 columns up top or 2 columns up top, and if you need complex formulas in these columns, we can do all of that. Anything that you could create in Excel, we can create. But the reports are interactive, so I can drill into these contributions. I could drill into that number of 74 million, and I can see where that number came from, and I can look at the ledger. And you can see that I can now use the ledger, and I can use my analysis mode. I can use my pivot table functionality. I could export it to Excel or export it to Teams or share it, send it to the auditors if I needed to. So if I needed to change it, maybe I want to filter this report. I just want to filter this specific income statement, but I want to filter it on a very specific cost center, or I want to filter it on a program. Maybe I want to filter it on the tutoring program as an example. So you can see the numbers went away because there's no data there, but I can dynamically interact with this report. And so I like the in-solution reports for your accountants. Any of your ERP users, I think, should use that. And that's one option. The other option is Power BI reports. And I think of Power BI reports, they're one option. So Business Central can integrate with lots of different reporting solutions, but Microsoft's flagship reporting and data analytics tool is Microsoft Power BI. And nonprofits are offered a very cheap subscription to Power BI through Microsoft nonprofit grants. And you can create really great reports that are interactive and board ready, but you can also share these reports externally with people that are not ERP users. So now I'm just want to point out up top here that there's different tabs. So I've got another tab up here that's Power BI. So I can go to powerbi.com. It's going to log in through my, single sign-on, and you can see all of the Power BI reports that have been shared with me, or that I've subscribed to, or maybe that I've created if I'm one of those Power users. And I'm just going to click through some versions of those reports to show you. Power BI can connect to any data source. It could connect to a CRM. It can connect to an ERP, connect to Salesforce, payroll solution. It could connect to a fundraising solution. So there's lots of things you can do with it. It doesn't just connect to your ERP. Microsoft Power BI is very powerful, and there's lots of things that you can do with it. And these are accounting reports. So I'm showing you accounting versions. But if you didn't like this report format, we could change it in any number of ways. And it's very similar to an Excel workbook. I've got various tabs here for the balance sheet. I've got one just for a basic budget versus actual. There's one up here for donations. So if you're into raising donations or grants, you can connect to your CRM database. And if you have volunteers, you can present that information, or cases. You can see how we can present various things. Maybe I want to present the net asset balance of my restricted funds. This is just a net asset balance report that your auditors would care about. Or maybe I want to look at the payroll. Here is a Power BI version of a payroll report. And so it's a very popular and powerful reporting solution that has mobile access. I could look at these reports on my phone. I could download the Power BI app, the Microsoft Power BI app. So this is for sort of all kinds of users, versus the in-solution reports, which are for more your hardcore accounting users, I would say. So with that is SylogistMission ERP. That's Microsoft Business Central, and that's how we have extended Business Central to for nonprofit functionality. So please let me know if you have any questions. Happy to connect, and thank you to Shannon and team for inviting me today.
Thanks, RK. Any questions? I know the audience hasn't asked any questions so far, but just wanted to put it out there. Is there any specific questions, or maybe I could tee it up with like what part of this webinar was the most valuable for your current situations?
So we have a question from Kathleen.
Okay.
So the question is there any advantage for customers currently in GP to implement software built on Business Central versus going to another cloud-based software such as Sage Intacct?
I'm happy to speak to that.
Yeah.
And you guys may have some other thoughts as well, but yes. So a couple of things. One, it's a common landing place. So Great Plains customers tend to migrate well to Business Central. Just the size and complexity of the organization, Great Plains offers a similar profile as does the Microsoft Business Central user. Number two would be it's common for those organizations to already be Microsoft organizations. So they're using Teams, they're used to Excel, they're using Outlook, they're D365 users. So going to a ERP that takes advantage of all those, it tends to be a plus. And then the user experience, there tends to be, I would say, a little bit less of a learning curve there as well. But Shannon, you may have additional ones also.
No, I think that's really good points. Microsoft Dynamics GP, there's hundreds of thousands of organizations that have standardized their businesses on it. And as you're all well aware, Microsoft is sunsetting that platform. So what we're finding now is that quite a few of those companies that are running GP are looking at alternate solutions such as Sylogist and Business Central. And to your point there is that familiarity with the users that have been working with the Microsoft productivity stack for many years, and they find a fairly smooth transition from a user experience.
Thank you, Shannon and RK for addressing that question.
Was there any specific features of SylogistMission ERP that stood out today that you weren't aware of that you see would have significant improvements within your organizations?
Another question from from Almer is for the for the indirect cost rules, does the system calculate actual indirect cost rates?
So that's a great question. I'm usually scared to go into those details on a webinar because I don't want to scare off anybody too much, try to be more general. But our solution is really, really good at that. And we've extended Business Central, and this is unique Sylogist functionality, but they're all based on our batch allocations, and I'm looking for a good example. But the answer is yes. The short answer is yes. I'm just wanting to show you that here's a really complex one. This one is allocating fringe-based benefits based on salary. But your example is calculating the indirect cost rate. We could do the same thing, but I can create very sophisticated, complex transactions that calculate the indirect cost rate and then apply it to a pool of activity. And the people that need that functionality, that use our solution, they love it, and that's why they love our solution. For that really nerdy accounting stuff.
All right. So RK and Shannon, we don't have any further questions, and we'll be reaching out to the attendees early next week. We'll also be sharing the webinar recording with you guys, and thank you for joining in.
Yeah, and I'd like to just say
Yeah.
too, thanks. I mean, for anyone that would be interested in a deeper dive session or a personalized demo, more than happy to engage and do that. So if anyone wants to give a thumbs up here in this chat here, we can make sure when we reach out with our email correspondence after this here that we know that there's an interest in some level of engagement to have those discussions. So we're here to help, and we appreciate everyone's time today. And thank you, and we look forward to communicating in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shannon, RK, and
Thank
all
you,
the
guys.
attendees. Yeah. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.